Welcome into this week's The Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things women's college basketball, WNBA, Unrivaled, and much, much more. We're still in limbo week of sorts here on The Women's Basketball Podcast, and in the women's basketball universe, the women's college hoop season has come to a close. The portal has officially closed, Mitch Northam, and the WNBA preseason just days away from kicking off. So we're going to span the entire wide world of women's basketball. But first, how are you? I'm loving the sun drop hat. You know, you always impress me with your hat game, Mr. Mitch.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm good. I did some traveling over the weekend. I went to DC on Saturday for a story that I'm writing about flag football. So yeah, that'll come out this week at SB Nation. And then Sunday I went to the ACC women's lacrosse title game down in Charlotte. Where I wrote about North Carolina and why they just kind of look like a death machine in the sport this year. They're the only undefeated team, and they beat Boston College again for the second time this season. So kind of pivoting to spring sports over on the beat. But also there were still plenty of women's college basketball to write about in the past week too, with some kind of weird things going on.
And I was working on the weekend like usual as well with the NFL draft. And so I'm excited to take a brief little pause away from my Jaguars and NFL coverage to get back to one of our favorite topics, Malaysia Fulwiley. I'm just kidding. We are going to get to Malaysia. We're going to get to her right off the top. But yes, excited to talk a little women's hoops here as the calendar flips from April to May. We start every episode with our Her of the Week. Speaking of Malaysia, I'm going to put Her of the Week and this week's number one agenda item and this week's starting five together because the biggest storyline in women's college hoops is that Malaysia Fulwiley is leaving South Carolina to go to LSU. She is following in the footsteps of Haley Van Lith, of Angel Reese, of Anissa Morrow, of these transfers who have gone to LSU and either thrived or had to transfer the next year because their draft stock absolutely tanked and they lost all confidence. Which do you think will be the case, though, for a player who, as we said, if she had seen more playing time under Dawn Staley in Columbia, South Carolina, may have been in the conversation for National Player of the Year, or at the very least, the most naturally God-given, talented player on a basketball court this winter?
I'm not sure. I really don't know what to think about Malaysia Fulwiley to LSU. It is not really a place. I know there were a lot of people who were like, I'm predicting that she will go to LSU like right off the bat. It was just not really a place I projected her to go. Because I mean, there's only so much ball, right? Like, and you're going to a place now where there are already two guards there in Michaela Williams and Flau'jae Johnson. Flau'jae Johnson needs the ball in her hands to be effective and to create winning plays for LSU and to be the player that she is. We've already sort of seen this a little bit. Like, I don't want to say that Malaysia Fulwiley is Haley Van Lith, but like, I just sort of wonder like what Kim Mulkey has envisioned and has planned for Malaysia Fulwiley and what the sell was, other than, if we're talking about monetary supplements, like what the actual, like, this is the plan that we have for you here. This is the player we envision you being. I'm very curious as to like what those conversations were like and like, what her role is going to be and that sort of thing. Because yeah, I mean, like Flau'jae Johnson is a ball dominant guard. And Michaela Williams is also there and also exists. And like, they have other guards that are coming in. They're like really highly ranked, freshman recruits. So I'm not 100% sure about this fit. And like, I have confidence, like, people, you can say what you want about Kim Mulkey, but she knows how to coach basketball, right? So like, I have confidence that like LSU is going to be good and like, they're going to figure this thing out at some point. I just don't know if like the end product is going to be the best thing for Malaysia Fulwiley, and if it's going to be what exactly she thought she was signing up for. And I find it curious that, like, from what I was told, this was the only visit that she took.
Right. This is the part of the conversation I want to have, which is it's the only visit she took. She canceled it initially. The weird winding recruitment is also fascinating.
Yeah, there were like the back and forths of like, she was going to visit LSU. Then she wasn't going to visit LSU. Then she's already in Baton Rouge. Then the visit actually never happened. then the coaches are out of town, and like there's a lot of just like mixed messaging, around the whole thing. But yeah, I was told, I mean, she didn't take any other visits, and it sure seems like that's the case. She was in the portal for, I guess, about a week or 2 weeks, something like that. And yeah, I just find it strange that like she didn't entertain or talk to anybody else. I mean, famously, when Angel Reese went into the portal, she went and visited LSU and canceled a visit to South Carolina that she was going to take. And that worked out for Angel Reese, right? I just kind of wonder, like, if there was even anybody else on Mylesia Fulwiley's radar, like if she talked to, the Under Armour thing is really fascinating to me because, like, she's not going to be able to wear her signature butter shoes in games, right? And like, if you're Mylesia Fulwiley, it's probably not really like a huge deal to you. Like, it's, and at LSU, like Flau'jae Johnson has a Puma deal and she doesn't wear Pumas in games and the whole thing. But Nike is going to put their foot down about that. Like they're not going to let her do that, even if she wanted to. Like we already saw the precedent set with Cooper Flagg at Duke this year, where like he came into college having a New Balance deal, and they're like, "Nah, son, you about to suit up these Nikes. Like you're not wearing New Balances in games at Cameron Indoor." So like I kind of wonder like what Under Armour thinks about all this, because like she got the Under Armour deal after her freshman year at South Carolina, and like after she had already kind of balled out and showed her stuff. And like you have somebody like Steph Curry who is really invested in her and like is wearing her things around. Like I just sort of wonder if they had any input at all. I would assume that based on where she went, that they probably did not have any input on where she was going to end up.
See, I would argue that LSU is still one of the preeminent brands in women's basketball. And so despite the
Sure.
fact that they're not an Under Armour school, I think ultimately keeping Mylesia in the national conscious, it was a real gamble, I think, for Adidas when Hailey Van Lith made the decision to go to TCU. Because ultimately, even when she went to LSU for that matter too, but again, she was going to a team that had just won the national title. And so I think they said, man, whatever, it's okay. But for her to go to TCU, a team that quite literally didn't have enough players to field a team the year prior, I would argue if you're Under Armour, it's actually, and I promise I'm only going to make one reference to the NFL draft in this podcast. It's kind of like the conversation we're having in Jacksonville right now about Travis Hunter. You don't have to go out of your way to put together some social media stunt with Travis in order to go viral. He will go viral solely because of who he is and the fact that he has a video crew following him at all times. You can make the same argument if you're Mylesia Fulwiley and you're going to LSU. There will be publicity. You don't have to seek it. You don't have to create it. Hailey Van Lith at TCU, not only did they have to create success on the court, they also had to bring themselves into the national conscious, not just by wins, but by the brand that they were able to create. And so that's where I think even if you're Under Armour, the hope is that this is her last year of college, right? I mean, she's so I guess she still has technically 2 years. Correct me.
Yeah, I don't know how old she is. So, the draft for the WNBA is always determined by age. Like if you turn 22 the year of the draft. So she just turned 20, so she's still got 2 more years.
Okay.
So she's the same age as Juju.
Correct. And so one of those years will be with Flau'jae, because Flau'jae Johnson does have 1 more year. She technically could have been eligible this past go around for the WNBA. And ultimately, again, kind of like Travis Hunter, Flau'jae Johnson's got a brand that she's going to be carrying. And if you're a proxy to that, and if you already have the Under Armour backing, you're going to bring yourself into the national spotlight. And because, again, it's Kim Mulkey as the head coach, and love her or hate her, she's going to win basketball games. And so you're in that national conscious that's growing the Under Armour brand, whether you're wearing it or you're not. So I had a feeling we would spend a little bit of time on this first topic in this week's starting 5. That's why she's the her of the week. That's why she's number 1 on the agenda. It's because Mylesia Fulwiley, one of the most polarizing players in women's basketball, is off to Baton Rouge.
Yeah. I would just say that they're only, we talk a lot about the conference realignment and schedules and stuff like that, and the lack of multiple matchups. We're only going to get 1 South Carolina LSU in the regular season next year, but it's going to be in Baton Rouge. And that game is going to be a circle your calendar, must watch. I think this past season, because of the snow, that game in Columbia was moved to a Friday at 5:00. And it was still one of the top 4 most watched regular season games of the season. That number, that it's going to do numbers. That's going to be one to watch.
And for those of you who are here for our WNBA 2025 season primer, do know, if you didn't know, Mylasia Fulwiley was born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina. She's not just having played for Dawn Staley's Gamecocks. She is literally from the same town.
And just to circle back one more point about the shoe thing, what's kind of interesting now and what could add a little bit more spice to that South Carolina LSU game is that because LSU is a Nike school, they can wear the A1s against South Carolina if they want to. Mylasia Fulwiley can put on a pair of A1s when they play against South Carolina, and South Carolina can't wear them because they're an Under Armour school. And I'm here to see that.
I know how that happened, but it's oof.
Yeah.
Kim, don't give her any fuel. You know Kim Mulkey's going to do that now. God, Mitch is just like giving fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I'm here. Let's get messy.
Yeah, let's keep it going. Speaking of messy, you need to tell us about this story that you wrote at SBNation.com. We've got a 30-year-old who hasn't played college basketball since 2016 in the portal. How? Why? What is happening?
So the first time I heard about this was on Friday, and then I had someone else text me about it on Saturday. And then I had somebody text me about it on Sunday.
So at that point, you're like, I have to write this because too many people are bringing this up.
And I had coaches texting me about like, isn't this the wildest, dumbest thing you've ever seen? And, so like I kind of dug into it a little bit. And basically to kind of make it a long story short, so Janae Jackson is a former player who played at Youngstown State University, home of the Penguins. She was a fine player. She's 5'9", average about 10 points, 6 rebounds a game. But she graduated in 2016. So she hasn't played college basketball in 9 years. And late last week, she entered the transfer portal. Again, hasn't played college basketball in 9 years. Graduated in 2016, entered the transfer portal last week. It's such a weird thing.
What has she been doing? What has she been doing the last 9 years?
So I found her on LinkedIn, actually. I was trying to find her on all the socials on Instagram and Twitter, and I couldn't really find an account that I was sure that was her. But I did find her on LinkedIn. She graduated with a degree in sociology. She's done some work for FedEx and Enterprise, and now works for another company where she's like the creative director of. Sounds like she's based in Michigan. But yeah, it's a pretty strange thing, but it's a thing that we're seeing a little bit more of basically over the past like 2 months, as we've seen it a lot more in men's basketball and in football, where there are basically players without eligibility. I can't even talk. Without eligibility are being advised to go into the transfer portal to basically keep their options open in case the NCAA revises its rules and guardrails around eligibility, because a lot of people believe that this House settlement could have an impact on the NCAA's eligibility rules. Or there's all these like multiple ongoing lawsuits sort of challenging the NCAA's eligibility standards. I mean, we saw one recently with, the quarterback at Vanderbilt who basically sued the NCAA saying that, my JUCO years don't count. And turns out the court decided he was right. And so now like you have a situation where, speaking at LSU, last year Poa goes into the portal because she played a year at JUCO. So she has a free year back. And now I can't remember where she enrolled at. I think she went to Arizona State.
Yeah,
I think she's with
Arizona
Molly Miller.
State. Yeah, Arizona or Arizona State.
So, there was another recent ruling. This Rutgers safety, I think, Jet Elad, I think, his ruling, a court ruled in his favor, said he could keep playing college football, which I think opens up the door up even further for some players to kind of pursue some extra eligibility. So, I mean, what Janae Jackson is doing is, I guess, just kind of trying to keep her options open in case she wants to come back to school at the age of, I'm pretty sure if I do my math right, I think she's 31. And yeah,
that's right, because I graduated college in 2015 and I'm 32. So yeah,
you
would be correct, sir.
Could come back, I guess, and maybe play a year. The other thing I think, that sort of works in her favor is like, back in, I'm going to say our day when we were in college, the NCAA rules were that you had basically 4 seasons to play, or 5 years to play 4 seasons of college sports. And that time for her, she was only able to play 3 years of college basketball because she had to redshirt 1 year because she transferred. And under, back in our day, you had to sit out a year when you transferred. And that's not the case anymore. And then the next year that she was at Youngstown State, she actually had to redshirt again because of injury. So she only played 2 years at Youngstown State, and she played 1 year at Northern Illinois. So I would guess that, like, if she pressed the NCAA hard enough, and I don't actually know what her motivations are. I reached out to her. I haven't heard back from her yet. But I would assume that if she pressed the NCAA hard enough, they might look at her case and be like, yeah, actually, you know what? Like, you can have a year back if you, at the age of 31, really want to play another year of college basketball, and if there's really a team out there willing to take a chance on you. And, based on what I'm hearing, like, some of these players that I don't think are all that good that are getting, some pretty sizable bags in the portal, like, maybe she can get a bag out of it. I don't know. But nevertheless, like, she's in the portal. I was talking to some coaches. It sounds like there's about 20 players on the women's basketball side that are in the portal right now who have basically seemingly no eligibility left. One of them is Georgia Woolley, who is at Syracuse, who's a pretty good ACC player. She's in the portal and has no eligibility left. Like, she played all 4 years, didn't really miss any time due to injury. Grace Cave is another one from Omaha who averaged like 16 points per game this past year. But they're in the portal just in case the rules change on the NCAA side. I think there's about 150 on the men's side who are in the portal without eligibility. So, as everybody likes to say, we're kind of in the wild, wild west, and we'll see what happens.
This is why you follow him at Primetime Mitch. Hopefully we get some correspondence from our 31-year-old transfer before and after this podcast drops. Let's jump around a little bit here, Mitch. While we're on the subject of the transfer portal, item number 3 in this week's starting 5, who is the most interesting name still remaining in the transfer portal?
For me, I think there's 4. I'll just run through them really quickly. The first one is Gianna Neepkins, who played at Utah, played 4 years there. She has an extra year because of the COVID year, or an injury year. I can't remember, but she has 1 year of eligibility left nonetheless. She was nearly a 50-40-90 player this past year. She's a really good 3-point shooter. Averaged 19.3 points per game. She's getting interest from like a lot of the heavy hitters out there, like South Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma, UCLA. Like, that's kind of the ballpark that she's in. She's really sought after. I think she's probably your best player left in the portal. Second up, I would say, is Sarah Williams, who's a 6'4" forward from Wisconsin. She was the Big Ten Player of the Year 2 years ago. Basically a walking double-double. She is basically in the mix with LSU, UConn, and North Carolina. So she's kind of
pretty heavy hitters too.
A lot of different like pots there in terms of like what you're really looking for. Like, if you just want to win and you want to play with Sarah Strong and AZ Fudd, I would say go to UConn. If you want to be like a star and get some NIL and the whole thing and also win, maybe you go to LSU. If you're looking for kind of something in between, maybe go to Chapel Hill, where you would be one of probably the best players on that roster and one of the best bigs in the ACC. I would say third is probably Ali Kubik, our friend from the University of Maryland, who's in the portal after spending some time with Brenda Freeze there. Really, really good, solid rotation player for the Terps for the past couple of years. Played really, really well this last year in the NCAA tournament. She's a post who can kind of step out and hit the 3 a little bit. In the NCAA tournament this year, averaged 15 points and 8 rebounds while making 4 or 5 3-pointers. So pretty good. She's somebody who I'm pretty sure is going to end up in the ACC. I just don't know exactly where. I was told that she has visits with Georgia Tech, where former Maryland assistant Karen Blair is now the head coach, Florida State, and NC State. And as we discussed on a previous pod, NC State could certainly use a 4 kind of hybrid player like Ali Kubik. The last one that I would mention is Kaylee Heckel, who came off the bench this past season for the most part for USC. As a freshman, she was one of the top recruits in her class. She was a McDonald's All-American, averaged like 6.1 points a game. But, was playing limited minutes because USC had this really stacked starting lineup, right? But she did come off the bench in that NCAA tournament win over Mississippi State, where Juju goes down with the injury. She has 13 points and 6 assists. So like the skill is there. I think her thing is like she just wants to play more. And so based on what I heard, she's visiting Notre Dame and Vanderbilt and Michigan State. We'll see where she ends up, but I think she's somebody who can be a really, really good guard in college basketball.
Does this mean someone will actually be on Notre Dame's roster besides Hannah Hidalgo in 2025, 2026? That would be something. That would be quite the development.
Potentially more than one player for Notre Dame.
Hey, listen, we're Niele Ivy fans on this podcast, regardless of whatever the heck happened with our national champion, Notre Dame. Hang the banner. We said they'd win the Natty, and obviously they did not. I promised I'd only have one NFL draft reference on today's podcast, Mitch. I lied. Number 4 in this week's starting 5. And I'm curious your intel, your thoughts on this. Raven Johnson dates Nick Emanuari, the safety from South Carolina, who was drafted in the 2nd round by the Seattle Seahawks. That's a great story. They did a bunch of TikToks together. Great couple. Rooting for them. The Rakea Jackson situation's a little bit more, a lot of smoke behind the scenes. So she is dating James Pierce again. Both, of course, went to Tennessee. Rakea, of course, now plays for the Los Angeles Sparks. He was drafted 26th overall. Jalen Walker went 15th overall. 26th overall by the Atlanta Falcons after they traded away next year's first to get back into the first round. I don't know how much you know about James Pierce, Mitch, but bit of a prickly character, to say the least. Some off the field, outside of Tennessee questions, especially with regards to the treatment of women. And and so I didn't even realize it was Rakea because I'm in the middle of doing like a bunch of different things in the middle of the media room during the NFL draft. And it was actually one of my colleagues on the beat who's a big WNBA fan. Shout out Justin Lewis. Hope he listens to this pod, by the way. I told him he should. He's the one who yelled out when the screen pops up and Rakea's next to him. He went, "Oh my God, it's Rakea." And yeah, it's just going to be a storyline to monitor. Look, I wish them both well, just like I wish Raven Johnson and I wish Nick Emanuari well. But knowing some of the returns that I've heard from people around the league, and knowing how well we loved Rakea Jackson and Unrivaled, and she's an ascending player, I just want what's best for her.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know a ton about this, so I'm going to kind of clear out and let you run ISO on this. But the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has a paragraph that says, Pierce had an interaction with law enforcement and had some personality quirks that apparently turned off some teams. His attitude and on-the-field drive were questioned. He also had what was described as a toxic relationship with WNBA player Rakea Jackson, who was by his side on draft night. And the headline of the story is Falcons comfortable with James Pierce's Jr.'s off-the-field issues. The Falcons in the news for a lot of the wrong reasons this past weekend, NFL draft weekend.
Everyone thought that Jeff Ulbricht's son was the most problematic part of the draft. What if I told you he was not?
They always be falconing. As I like to say, as someone who used to live in Atlanta. My only NFL draft takeaway is that I wish the Steelers would have taken Shedeur Sanders, but they didn't do that. And so Will Howard, sure, we'll see what happens.
Mel Kiper is playing his world's smallest violin right alongside of you, Mitch.
Oh, Mel Kiper was playing a big violin.
He was playing a banjo. He was strumming away about poor Shedeur. But that's a story for another time. Let's wrap this week's starting 5 with another story that you have cooking at SB Nation. You had a very cool opportunity at the Final Four and the national championship to sit in with the crew who's become a part of the women's basketball college game day staple, if you may.
Yeah, so every year at the Final Four, usually, I guess it's like that Thursday morning, there's like a big media day. It's kind of when, all the players and coaches go to the podium and then we get locker room access. Usually that morning, these past couple years, they've done kind of like a sort of like they'll serve breakfast, and then a lot of the ESPN talent will be at like tables, and you can just go up and interview them and talk to them. And I was interested in just talking to, the college game day crew of Elle Duncan, Andrea Carter, and Shanae Gumake, because I've gotten a chance to be in person for a couple college game days. I went to Virginia Tech back in 2024. I was at NC State this past year. And I was just kind of curious, and this is really what my story is about. Like, what is next for college game day for women's college basketball? This show is one of ESPN's iconic brands. Producer Dimitri has written a lot about it over the years. The football version at least, and then it kind of morphed into, they got a men's basketball version, and then over the past couple of years, we've done this women's basketball thing where it seems like it's grown every year. I think we got 3 shows the first year in 2022, 3 in 2023, 5 in 24, and then we were supposed to get 5 this year. The LSU South Carolina one was canceled because of snow, so we only got 4. And basically, like the kind of what it all boiled down to when I was talking to the 3 of them, what they all kind of agreed on was a couple of things. Like, one, they want to do more shows, and I think they want to start earlier in the season. Now, I don't know if that means that they're going to start in November, because then you're kind of stepping on the toes of football, and not even the men's basketball show does that. So I'm curious to see kind of where ESPN lands on that, because I know from talking to all 3 of them that they really want to do a game day show from this USC South Carolina Battle of the Real SC game, which is going to be in November. It's going to be on November 15th. It's going to be on a Saturday. It's also going to be on Fox, which is another thing that has been sort of a thing with the women's basketball college game day. The football game day, they will pretty much go wherever the big story is, wherever the big game is. It doesn't really matter what network it's on. Like, they kind of, I feel like if you did the math, it would be kind of 50-50 split between games that are on the ESPN platforms and games that are not on ESPN platforms. On women's game day, they've basically done 13 shows since 2022 now. 12 of them have been on ESPN platforms. The lone exception was a Caitlin Clark game. So that was kind of the other thing that Elle Duncan and Andrea really talked about, was like deciding kind of what direction this show needs to go in terms of like, is this best as a standalone show where it's on at the same time every single week from wherever the biggest game is at? Or is this basically what it's been the past couple of years, where it's kind of a pregame show for a show that's going to be on an ESPN platform? And then the other thing is that, like Shanae really talked about, like, they feel like they missed some opportunities to go to some big games and to tell some big stories this year. Like she pointed out, this was the year of LA basketball, right? Like, UCLA went to the Final Four. Juju Watkins was the National Player of the Year. College game day was never in LA, was never at USC or UCLA, which I think she saw as like a big problem. Like, if you're going to tell the story, if you're going to try to be the signature show of this sport and you're not there, and I guess the argument is like, well, all those games are on Fox or NBC because they're a Big Ten brand. I think that's a real problem that she saw. The other one is like, UConn won the national championship. It was Paige Becker's victory tour, so to speak. And UConn is in ESPN's backyard, and they never went to stores this season because most of the UConn games are on Fox because Fox is the Big East.
Let me throw another curveball and a counter argument. We have Big Noon Kickoff on Fox on the football side. We really don't have anything for men's basketball. I can't think of potentially who even would front a women's basketball pregame show that would be akin to Big Noon Kickoff on the Fox side of things. Is that potentially, I know that wouldn't involve those women because they're all under contract with ESPN. Oh, sure. Is that, though, something that you could foresee Fox leaning in, especially knowing the cast of characters and hosts that they have thanks to the Big Ten Network and the Big East Network?
I would love to talk to Fox about that, or NBC or Peacock or whoever it is, because I think that if ESPN doesn't let this brand expand, I think there is an opening there for a Fox or an NBC or whoever to say, okay, well, if you're not gonna,
we'll do it, even
if you're not going to do this every week consistently.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, all those channels, like, they have really good talent working for them. I mean, Aaliyah Boston has been great on TV. I really enjoyed her. Megan McKeon is another person who's been really good on TV. There are people like that you could pull from to kind of put this together. Also, Fox, give me and me a call. We'll do your show.
We're ready. Jacob Ullman, I sent you an email. We were corresponding the other day. Just let me know whenever you're ready, dog. We're ready to go.
Yeah, I definitely think there's an opening there if ESPN doesn't kind of roll the ball further down the hill with this show. There's an opening for somebody else to do that.
I promised producer Dimitri we'd be quick through this week's starting five. We're 30 minutes into the show, and we just wrapped this week's starting five. So let's keep it moving, Mitch. It's time for our 2025 WNBA primer. I know that's why so many of you are here. You want to get into the W this year. You love Paige Beckers. You love Angel Reese. You love CC22, Caitlin Clark. You want to know what's the lay of the land. And we are here to provide you team by team everything you need to know. A couple of these teams we're just going to run through kind of quickly because I'm sorry, ConnecticutSun, I don't think you're going to be competing for a championship this year. But there will be some others that, needless to say, we will spend a bit more time on. We begin, Mitch, as we probably should, which is with the reigning champions, the New York Liberty. This past season, of course, in addition to winning the title, the New York Liberty finished 32-8. They'll begin their regular season May 17th against Las Vegas. And of course, a projected starting lineup of Sabrina Ionescu, Brianna Stewart, Jonquel Jones, the big three, followed by Natasha Cloud and Leonie Fibach. I always mispronounce it.
I think it's Fibich.
One of the breakout candidates from a season ago and a member of that rotation. They lose Courtney Vandersloot, who goes back to Chicago. What do you make of the Liberty heading into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, still a really good roster. I wonder how the Cloud-Ionescu partnership goes in the backcourt. And I wonder how they're impacted by the losses of Courtney Vandersloot and Kayla Thornton, who was lost in the expansion draft. Bentaja Lady Hamilton is sidelined, I think, for most of the year here.
Yep.
Yeah, so I just kind of wonder, like, do they have enough? Do they have the juice to put this thing together and run it back? I also kind of wonder what Nia Sabali's role is going to be this year after she had, a really, really good finals run, really helped them win that game 5. So yeah, I think all eyes are going to be on the Liberty in terms of like, can they repeat? Can they get back? Can Brianna Stewart, be just as good as she was last year? How much does Jonquel Jones still have left in the tank? How much better can Sabrina Ionescu get?
And certainly this is a Liberty team that didn't have a whole heck of a lot of capital to play with in the WNBA draft. And so it's a roster that largely looks exactly like the one that we saw holding the trophy at season's end.
Yeah, definitely. I think, not a whole lot of change here other than the big point guard thing. Courtney Vandersloot out, Natasha Cloud in. I just kind of wonder how that's going to go.
Let's keep it moving with the team that finished as runner-ups in the WNBA finals, a team that I think if I had told you a year ago, Mitch, that they were going to go all the way, yes, you probably would have said, well, Cheryl Reeves, she's one of the best coaches in the W. Of course, they're going to make a run. But this ragtag bunch, not to mention the ascension of Napheesa Collier, leads the MinnesotaLynx to the promised land, to the WNBA finals, ultimately falling to the aforementioned New York Liberty. But certainly a team that you can make the argument, Mitch, this is where maybe they take another step forward, or was last season, quite frankly, just lightning in a bottle and Courtney Williams being on an absolute heater?
Yeah, I guess that's a big question, right? It's like, is what they did last season replicable in terms of, Courtney Williams playing out of her mind in the postseason. And yeah, like you mentioned, the ascension of Napheesa Collier, it seems like that she's kind of kept that going. We talk about, she was really, really good and unrivaled. If she can kind of just keep that play up and keep getting better, Napheesa Collier is somebody who, if you're looking for kind of a dark horse pick, maybe for MVP, like if you don't want to bet on, Asia Wilson to repeat or Caitlin Clark to nab one or Brianna Stewart, I think Napheesa Collier is a pretty good bet. She's actually third in odds on FanDuel right now, and I'm not sure what she is on DraftKings, but I'll look at some other time. I think that's the big question here is what you did last season replicable? I think it probably is. I think because a big part of that was just the fact that you have Cheryl Reeve and no other team does.
They have their entire starting five back from that team that lost in overtime of the decisive Game 5 of the WNBA Finals. That, of course, includes Fee Collier, Courtney Williams, which we talked about both those players. Bridget Carleton still hanging around Minnesota. It's kind of rare to see a player entering year 7 and still with the team that drafted her, even if she's not perhaps one of the preeminent names that you think of when you think of that franchise. Kayla McBride and Elena Smith, round out the starting five for the Minnesota Lynx, who went 30-10 last year. And they were, 18 wins the year prior, 20 wins, something like that. The number is escaping me. But point being, a massive jump from a group that not many were expecting from in 2024. A lot will be expected in 2025.
Is Bridget Carleton just kind of like a part of the arena, or like is she like the Udonis Haslam, like Miami Heat?
I'd say she's Udonis at this point.
Yeah. She's just there no matter what. Yeah.
And you couple that with the fact that she played in Ames, and so that's like approximately like 3.5 hours away. And so like she's just there. Like you can't have the Minnesota Lynx without Bridget Carleton.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. Who will be the Bridget Carleton for the Golden State Valkyries? Yes, from the two preeminent teams that made it all the way to the finals, we go to the newest team in the W this season. The Golden State Valkyries will make their debut in the regular season, preseason, of course, coming up this weekend, against the Los Angeles Sparks on May 16th. Here is their projected starting five. Tiffany Hayes, Kayla Thornton, Monique Billings, Teme Fagbenle, and Julie Van Loo. I do not see Kate Martin's name in that starting five. I don't see Caitlin Chen's name in that starting five, which breaks my heart because I'm just kidding about Caitlin Chen, but not. And Kate Martin, I think, is going to be the 6th woman of the year potentially, or at the very least will be in that conversation depending on how the Valkyries fare, because I think it's interesting when you think the Valkyries in their limited history so far, who is the player that you say, oh, that's the face of the Valkyries, especially knowing, Mitch, that their front office has been very vocal. They're not trying to dub anyone the face of the franchise, and that's why they weren't forcing any sort of crazy pick in the WNBA draft, because they know that this is a long-term build.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like their first-round pick might not even come over this year, TBD on Juice Day. But yeah, I think that's my question. You mentioned Kate Martin. Like, how big of a part of like the rotation is she going to be, and like how big of a role is she going to have? I kind of look at this roster and I don't really see a reason why she can't be a starter and can't be the face of this team.
Because I think she is. Like, I love Teme, but like in terms of name recognition, like, and yes, a lot of it is because she's best friends with Caitlin Clark, but like, truly, in terms of players that contributed to their team in a meaningful way and started games in the W last year, I mean, you could make the argument she's probably the biggest name next to Tiff Hayes.
Yeah, I think so. I think Monique Billings is good and has some good years ahead of her. I think Cheyenne Sellers, if she can kind of get healthy, like can have an impact on this team. But like, I look at this roster and I say, why not for Kate Martin? I think she can certainly be maybe the best player on this team. I think she can be a starter. I think she can be the face of this team in year 1. Now, I don't know what she's exactly going to be the face of. I don't know how good they're going to be. I mean, Julie Valou is another player who I think is super talented and, one of the older rookies last year, but like had some really good games for the Mystics, played really well in the Olympics. It's an interesting team. I guess like, I don't expect a whole lot from them in terms of wins, but I'm just kind of interested in like what it looks like in year 1.
I know they did really well with their season ticket allotment. So they're going to pack the arena. They're going to pack the Chase Center, and that's good for women's basketball. But yes, it's going to be fascinating because I know they're not going to be a finished product at year's end this year, but also at the same time, who's the face on the banner outside of the arena? Like that's what I think is going to be so interesting to see, because I think at this point, and again, I don't think I'm biased when I say it, I think it's Kate Martin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. I think she's the one at this point where everybody on that roster is at in their careers. Like if this was 6 years ago, I think it's Tip Hayes, but it's not 6 years ago. It's 2025. And so I think right now it's Kate Martin. And I think like it also just said a lot to me in terms of like what she means to a locker room and like what she brought to the Aces last year in terms of like how tore up like that team was that like they had to let her go in the expansion draft, and had a really great relationship with Asia Wilson and all that stuff. So yeah, I expect I'm looking forward to the kind of season that she's going to have.
All right, we won't bury the lead. The next team, as we go through our WNBA preview, is the team that I know many of you are fascinated by. It's the team that I don't know what the odds are in the sports books up there in North Carolina, Mitch, but certainly nationally, the conversation when it comes to the WNBA surrounds the Indiana Fever, the second season of Caitlin Clark in the W, and how this team that's been retooled with a new coach, they've brought in some veteran players. You can make the argument they're in win now mode, combined with that young core that they still have predominantly on rookie contracts, and where they go from here. And so the Indiana Fever's projected starting lineup after a 20-20 season in which they finished sixth in the standings and lost in the first round to the ConnecticutSun. Former ConnecticutSun leader, DeWanna Bonner, Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark, Natasha Howard, and Kelsey Mitchell. Of course, it is important to note Sophie Cunningham coming over in a trade from the PhoenixMercury. Lexi Hull emerged in her third season in the W as a wing, and of course as the mermaid, the friend of Caitlin Clark, the Batman and Robin. And so I think that what stands out to me, and I know that this was also going to be a critique of Steph White's first team back with the Fever, this idea of, did they go out and get too many pieces? Did they go out and get a couple players who clearly are in the final years of their career, coupled with the trade for Sophie Cunningham, who we talked about Flau'jae Johnson earlier? How much does Sophie need to have the ball in her hands? How much should Caitlin Clark have the ball in her hands as a true point guard versus maybe playing off the ball? Do you have Kelsey Mitchell perhaps do a little bit more of the ball handling? I think what they did was they went out and they got a bunch of versatile pieces, and that's going to give Steph White an ability to run out a couple different lineups. I don't want to say they're going to be Kim Caldwell hockey shifts, because Caitlin Clark's going to play 30 plus minutes. And I would think Aaliyah Boston, if she stays out of foul trouble, will as well. And Kelsey Mitchell, you hope she stays healthy, and she's also in that sort of range. But I think that what they did was they went out and they got a lot of players who can do a lot of different things, and they can present many different looks.
That was my read on this as well. Is like they clearly have a big three, right? It's Caitlin, number first and foremost one, and then Aaliyah Boston, and then Kelsey Mitchell, and like so those are your stars. That's the core of your roster, and then you went out and you got all these interesting pieces to put around her. If you need somebody to come in and be the stopper, I mean, who was the player who had the most success guarding Caitlin Clark last year? It was DeWanna Bonner. And now you added her to your roster. She's, a super veteran, has been around a long time, but it still has a lot left in the tank, can still be one of the best defenders in the WNBA. You went out and got Brianna Turner, a versatile forward who can do a lot of things. You got Sophie Cunningham, who can come off the bench and get really hot, hit some threes, play some good defense, do some things. It is a really good roster. It signaled to me, I mean, that coupled with hiring Stephanie White does signal to me we're ready to win now mode. Let's go get after this. Let's capitalize on having Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston on these cheaper rookie contracts and spending and kind of putting the pieces around them. I think the expectation for the Fever is to go to the finals and see what happens. They went to the playoffs last year, lost in the first round. I think the moves that they made in the offseason clearly should signal to their fan base and to everybody else that they're ready to win big. Just to kind of circle back to the betting side of things, they are fourth in odds on DraftKings to win the finals at plus 380 behind the Liberty, Aces, and Lynx. And on FanDuel, they're third at plus 350, actually tied for second with the Aces at plus 350. So it is the expectation, I think, of the sports books as well. They're like, this is a title contending team.
And I think that the one critique we can make of this roster, or at the very least, it's what Fever fans have been clamoring to me about, the idea of Aaliyah Boston still is the tallest player on this roster. Did they actually go out and find another rim protector, someone who can come in for those defensive minutes while Aaliyah either is in foul trouble or to spell her a quick little breather? That still hasn't been addressed. I think, though, bringing in DeWanna Bonner and trying to beef up your defense throughout the playing field. I think that is certainly one way of doing it, but I did find it interesting to hear that sort of feedback about, hey, they didn't go out and they didn't get Kwame Brown or somebody who's going to just clog up the paint per se.
Yeah, I mean, Dewana Bonner and Brianna Turner are two players who are really long and like can be rim protectors for you. They did get Damaris Dantas, who
Yeah, they've had her. Yeah, she was a real great pickup mid-season last year.
yeah, she can be kind of somebody like in that vein that can kind of just soak up some minutes and clog up the lane a little bit for you. So yeah, I think they'll be all right in that department. They might have some trouble, as every team will when they go up against the Asia Wilsons of the world, but that's cost of doing business.
That is the way it goes in the W. Let's keep it going. Our next team in our primer, another team with an exciting young core. That is the Dallas Wings. It's the Paige Becker show. We already heard that they will be building a practice facility in downtown Dallas, still playing out there at UTSA this year, and hopefully a couple more games at American Airlines Arena to come. But certainly a team, Mitch, that, look, Arike Ogunbowale, Paige Beckers, I don't want to put this bad juju into the universe, but a couple months ago, we questioned the idea of the backcourt of Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles, the great social experiment that was. I feel like this is the equivalent in the W.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question about this. And we've been asking this question now ever since Dallas won the lottery is this backcourt going to work? We were wondering not only, before we even got to is this backcourt going to work? It was like, okay, well, if Dallas is going to get Paige, are they just going to trade Arike? They didn't do that. And okay, well, is Paige going to agree to play there? She certainly has. So we're going to see. We're going to find out, I think, over these next couple months, if this is a partnership that can work together. Paige is not somebody, I think I've said this on the podcast before, she's not somebody who needs the ball in her hands all the time to be effective. But if you're Dallas, you want the ball in her hand a lot. And Arike very much is a player who needs the ball in her hands to give her your best, to give a team everything that she can bring to a team. And, Arike is a pretty good player, pretty good shooter. Led the league in scoring not that long ago. So they have, I think, a really interesting roster that they've kind of assembled around those two. I like we got Dejanay Carrington here. We got Nalissa Smith. We got Isaiah James also in the draft. I kind of wonder, if we kind of get to a point where the Arike Paige thing isn't working, does Dallas just say, well, what if we trade Arike and we just try Isaiah James next to Paige Beckers, in terms of a thing going forward? I mean, they did draft Isaiah James in the first round. They think that highly of her. So, yeah, I mean, I wonder what her role is going to be in all this. I think there's potential here for this to work out really well. And I think there's potential here for Dallas to call an audible and make a couple pivots.
Speaking of lane cloggers, I shouldn't have said Kwame. I should have said Tierra McCowan, another one who, when you think rim protector, that's who you think. They had both of them last year, and it was just watching it in person when I went out to Dallas to see the Fever play. I was like, oh my God, they're so tall. But the Fever still won that game, or they lost the game, but Caitlin set a record. Story for another time. Other names to look out for on that Wings roster, certainly Maddie Siegrist now in year 2. And obviously they've had a couple Wings, a couple draft picks who've kind of come and gone a little bit. And so it's going to be interesting, to your point, to see at what point do they say this is Paige's team. Either we trade Arike, or maybe they do find success early on and they lean into this group that they have.
Yeah, we'll see. I think those are the big questions. Yeah, it's I think that's where you have to start in terms of your rebuild this year with Dallas is let's figure out right off the bat if this partnership is going to work. And if it's not, let's figure out what the solution is going to be.
Let's keep it moving with another team that I thought would enter full-blown rebuilding mode. They really haven't. That's the Seattle Storm. They finished 25-15. They lost in the first round a season ago. They bring a lot back. I think they have to be, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, Mitch, they have to be one of the older teams in the WNBA this upcoming season, and that's despite trading away Jewel Lloyd. Expected starting lineup when they face Phoenix on May 17th, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Alicia Clark, Gabby Williams, Aneka Agumake, and Ezzy Magbegor. I will never pronounce her name right either. I apologize. This is a team, Mitch, that it was very interesting to see kind of roster construction after the trade, after they get the number 2 overall spot. I'm realizing, though, as I'm rattling off all these veteran names, there's one name we need to talk about, and she is not here in the continental United States yet, and that is the number 2 overall pick, the female Wemby.
Dominique Malonga. Yeah, she's not here yet. And I think that's the big question is like, she is, she'll be here soon. She's finishing her season in France. And I just kind of wonder, like what year one looks like for her and how fast Seattle is kind of willing to sort of pivot the franchise into the youth movement into her direction, or are they just going to try and get as much as they can out of kind of this older core that we just kind of ran through in terms of Skylar Diggins and Alicia Clark and Neko Ogumake and Gabby Williams. Williams is now here, for a full season. I think that'll be a big thing for them. And then, kind of elsewhere down the roster, like I think they have some interesting pieces. We talked before about Serena Sundell. I think she has a chance to make this roster and have an impactful season. They've got Lexi Brown. They've got Katie Lou Samuelson.
Erica Wheeler, the ageless wonder.
Yeah. They've got an interesting team. I think it's certainly a playoff roster if everything comes together. But, I kind of wonder, like, if we delay, if the Dominique Malonga hype train will be delayed at all, or when she gets here, if they'll just kind of unleash her and like play her 20 minutes or so a game and just like kind of let her do Dominique Malonga things and throw down some dunks and all that fun stuff.
And of course, sadly, we won't have Nika Mule for the entire 2025 season.
No.
So I'm very curious to see again. I just can't help but look at the Storm and feel like they are this team, in the words of the Kenny Chesney song, where you're stuck between 17 and everyone she knows. Like that's where the Storm are. They've got all these veteran pieces that you've heard about for years, even if they're in the twilight of their career. They've got a couple of young premier draft picks who are expected to take a step forward. But where exactly do you bring all those pieces together? So the Seattle Storm are a great social experiment in my estimation.
Great American philosopher, Kenny Chesney.
Exactly. We've gotten NFL draft references. We've gotten Kenny Chesney. Let's kick it on over to the Las Vegas Aces, the 2-time WNBA champions who have the second best odds, according to the sports books up there in North Carolina. I haven't looked at what our friends at Hard Rock Bet have yet. Yes, certainly some change is afoot in LV. Jewel Lloyd comes to Vegas to join Becky Hammond's squad. They say goodbye to Kelsey Plum as she is traded away to Los Angeles. The expected starting 5 when they open up the season at the New York Liberty: Chelsea Gray, the point guard; Jewel Lloyd; Kia Stokes, the pride of Marion, Iowa; Asia Wilson; Jackie Young. Many familiar faces, Mitch, but obviously biggest question facing the Aces heading into 2025. How does Jewel Lloyd mesh with this unit, and how do they fare without Kelsey Plum?
Yeah, I think both of those are kind of the big questions here, right? Does Jewel Lloyd, seemingly fit in, and do they not miss a beat with the loss of Kelsey Plum? What more does she give them? Does she give them something that Kelsey Plum did not give them? I also I have kind of questions about like how sort of the bench is going to look and like what the rest of the depth of this roster is going to look like. I think, when the Aces won, initially like 2 years ago, like one of their big reason why I think they won was because they had really good depth kind of all the way down the roster. They bring back Megan Gustafson, who's been a solid, center off the bench for them. They also brought in Dana Evans, who I think can be a really good guard off the bench for them. Elizabeth Kitley is healthy and in training camp. She was there. I don't know if she was
stash. Second
round pick last year. I couldn't remember if she was first or second round, but coming off that knee injury that she suffered at Virginia Tech. So I'm really excited to see Elizabeth Kitley, like, just to get to play in the WNBA. I mean, like, she's a legit 6'6". Like, if she can be effective in this first year, like, and that gives them some real size to come off the bench, like that could be, a big problem for some other teams. We just talked about how the Fever really don't have somebody like that. So I mean, I think that the Aces expectation is like, we still have Asia Wilson and we still have Chelsea Gray. And so,
now we have Jewel Lloyd.
Right, and we still have Jackie Young, and so therefore we should be able to contend for a championship. And
Never
so
say we didn't say anything nice about you, Notre Dame fans. We're here for the Aces rebirth.
shout out to Jackie Young. And yeah, so we'll see if that happens. I'm curious to see just kind of like this isn't a totally new look Aces, but it's as different as they've looked kind of during this Becky Hammond run, I think.
Yeah, it's a retool team. You bring up a great point with Kitley, especially because as much as, yes, I'm always going to root for Iowa-born players, even if they spurred their home state and went to go play for Gino Auriemma. Kia Stokes at times was offensively challenged, and that presented a problem because, look, Becky wants to run a 5-out offense where you've got 5 shooters on the floor at all times. And yes, she brings some defensive presence, but at times when you're not getting that spot contributing to you on the offensive end of the floor, then that limits your ceiling. And in turn, you saw that, especially down the home stretch of the season. It's part of why you saw them go to a smaller lineup with Kate Martin at times, not necessarily at the 5, but certainly integrating more shooters onto the floor, more hustle plays too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm rooting for Elizabeth Kitley. I interviewed her a lot over the years in ACC country. She's from here in North Carolina. I would like to see her do well. If she can be kind of like, I don't know if she's eligible for Rookie of the Year necessarily. I don't know if that's NBA rules, like if you sit out a year and you can still be Rookie of the Year. But yeah, I would like to see her play well and maybe be like that first backup to Asia Wilson.
6 more teams to get through. Let's rattle them through, Mitch. The PhoenixMercury, 19-21 last season. They finished 7th in the WNBA standings. This is a completely new look Mercury. I am fascinated by what they're doing out there in the desert in the post Brittany Griner, post Diana Taurasi era. So many people thought this is a team that would be rebuilding. They'd lean into the WNBA draft. Instead, they go out, they drop a bag for Satu Sabali. Obviously, Kalia Copper, the Olympic gold medalist, is still hanging around. They bring in Alyssa Thomas in the twilight of her career. I think it's fascinating, much like the Seattle Storm, how the Mercury are approaching this new era without a superstar from the previous 5 to, well, in the case of Taurasi, 20 years.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this projected starting lineup thing on ESPN and like, yeah, it's weird seeing a PhoenixMercury projected starting lineup without the names Diana Taurasi or Brittany Griner in it.
And Sophie Cunningham, for that matter, too.
Yeah, it's an interesting roster. I don't know exactly how good it will be. I see that Celeste Taylor's name is in here, and Celeste Taylor was a player who bounced around to a lot of different rosters last year in her first year in the league, but former Duke Blue Devil, former semifinalist for National Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah, I'd like to see her do well. But yeah, it's an interesting and kind of weird roster. Satu, Kalia Copper, Alyssa Thomas, they've got talent. I don't know. We'll see.
This is the Kalani Brown team, by the way, since I know everybody is keeping score on where my favorite 6'7" forward is playing in 2025.
Shout out to Kalani Brown.
Shout out to Kalani. All right, on to another team that is a fascinating social experiment. The Carl Semesco-led AtlantaDream. Speaking of Brittany Griner, this is where she lands. We documented last week their gym situation in terms of their off-season workout program. The AtlantaDream, Mitch, will they shoot threes like the Florida Gulf Coast Eagles prided themselves on throughout Semesco's 15-year run in Fort Myers, or are they going to lean into Griner as the face of this franchise?
I don't know. I would like to see them try to be Florida Gulf Coast. I think that would be a lot of fun and be really weird and interesting. I would like to see Carl Semesco try to turn Brittany Griner into a three-point shooter. I don't know if it's the best idea to like try to make Brittany Griner like the face of this franchise. It's sort of, she's, I don't want to say in the twilight of her career, but like she is 34 years old and like I think the face of your franchise should probably be Ryan Howard. And so we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. An interesting bet that I think our listeners might be interested in at FanDuel, you can bet on WNBA's regular season leader in three-pointers made. And far away, the favorite is Caitlin Clark, right? At minus 120. But if you go to fifth in the odds, it's Ryan Howard at plus 1,100. And I just think, like, if Carl Semesco is really going to try this thing, if we're really going to try this 5-out, four out, one in kind of Florida Gulf Coast stuff, and like we're gonna jack up threes and take layups. Like that's kind of enticing. That could be an interesting thing to kind of keep an eye on.
I mean, that was part of why Ryan Howard was taken as high as she was in the WNBA draft. This thought of she can do a little bit of everything. Maybe she hasn't had the opportunity to do a little bit of everything with how the Atlanta Dream operated the last 2 years that she's been in the league. And certainly, Jordan Canada, Alicia Gray, Brianna Jones, these are players that have a lot of pelts on the wall, have a lot of games under their belt. And so that's what's so interesting to me, is just knowing it is a kind of like Seattle, like we talked about. It's a veteran roster, but with what sort of approach, it's a mystery. I'm fascinated to see, because again, I think are so used to, okay, in any sport, new coach comes in, brings a new identity, wants young players so that they can create this thing in their own image and bring those players along with them. And instead, to see preeminent names in the WNBA over the last 10 plus years beyond that roster, it's going to be an interesting social experiment too.
Yeah. Pelts on the wall of Paul Millsap's gym.
I promise you, Connecticut Sun, we are going to give you more than 3 minutes. The Connecticut Sun, a very different version, finished 28-12 in third place in the WNBA. They lost in the semifinal round. Their projected starting lineup this year, the first team that has ever lost its head coach and its entire starting five from a playoff run. This is how they read. Technically, Marina Mabrey was on the team last year. I'm sure we're going to end up talking about her. Diamond DeShields, Tina Charles, the veteran, the all worlds, Lindsay Allen, Olivia Nelson-Ododo. They do bring in a couple different pieces, whether that be Sanaya Rivers and Anissa Morrow via the draft, JC Sheldon, a wing and former pick of the DallasWings, who's a promising prospect. But yeah, this is the team that I say, new head coaching staff, ground zero, and poor Marina Mabrey is still being held captive by the Connecticut Sun.
Yeah, I got nothing here. Good luck, Connecticut. I think it's going to be a rough year. I think your roster is very messy. I don't really know if it makes a whole lot of sense. I hope that Anissa Morrow can learn a lot from Tina Charles. I hope that Sanaya Rivers gets the chance to play a lot of minutes, because I think that she needs to play a lot of minutes and develop and learn some new kind of tricks of the trade and just kind of unleash her talent a little bit. Other than that, I don't know. I think it's going to be a rough year for the Connecticut Sun up in Mohegan.
I don't think it will be as rough a year for the Los Angeles Sparks, who finished with just 8 wins a year ago. They will get Cam Brink back at some point as she returns from an ACL tear she suffered in July. But as of now, their projected starting lineup, the newly acquired Kelsey Plum, second-year sensation Rakaya Jackson, De'Erica Hamby, Odyssey Simmons, and Azare Stevens. Mitch, what is your prediction? Give me an over-under, maybe jockeying for position in the standings. Do you think the Sparks take the leap now with Kelsey Plum and, if only for the second half of the season, a healthy Cam Brink?
Yeah, I think that there's potential here for the Sparks team to be a playoff team. I think I said it at the time, but I do think that it was the right move to trade that pick for Kelsey Plum, just because there was so much uncertainty with this draft. You didn't know if Olivia Miles was coming or not, and hey, it turns out she did not. And so, I think if you look at kind of the players who went 2, 3, 4, and you ask yourself, hey, do I want one of them, or do I want in her prime Kelsey Plum leading my team forward with Lynn Roberts now? I think that's a good bet. I think Rakaya Jackson got a whole lot better as the year went on last year. You got De'Erica Hamby, as you mentioned. You're going to get Cam Brink back at some point. Another just like kind of interesting sort of long shot bet here. Like, I just kind of think the partnership of like Lynn Roberts and Kelsey Plum together could create the potential for Kelsey Plum to score a whole lot of points. She's in a situation now where she does not have to defer to players like Asia Wilson or Chelsea Gray or Jackie Young. She's going to be that team's far and away number one option. So I'm looking at FanDuel. They have odds for the regular season leading scorer. Kelsey Plum is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th in those odds at plus 2,200. I think if you're looking for an enticing bet, that is perhaps one that you would like to make. Kelsey Plum to lead the WNBA in scoring, potentially.
Who says we don't do Making Money with Mitch once the college season is over? We'll bring it back once the W season picks up again. as well. But yes, I think it'll be interesting. Year one for Lynn Roberts and Kelsey Plum from the San Diego area, originally back home in Los Angeles. There's going to be at least one person listening to this podcast. I'm sure it's my co-host during the week, Taylor Dahl, who's going to say, of course, Mia put Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky towards the bottom, towards the end of this primer. It was not intentional, folks. Some might even say I'm saving the best for last. The Washington Mystics, obviously, right? I'm just kidding. We do root for the Chicago Sky, if for no other reason, Mitch, because we are here for the Hailey Van Lith redemption arc. And look, what's great about the situation with Courtney Vandersloot going back to Chicago is that she's not going to be expected to start day one. This is certainly Angel Reese's team. Camila Cardoso too, although I would argue that Angel Reese is much more of the bus driver. This is a team that, yes, it's young. It has a new first-year head coach. They still have some other veteran pieces, though, that I think will help elevate these younger players as they take the next step.
Yeah, I guess my big question with Chicago is, like, did you make enough changes? Did you make the right changes in the offseason to make this a playoff team? You went out and you got a new coach. You got Tyler Marsh, who brings in a whole new coaching staff and the whole thing. I saw some clip with, Courtney Paris, working with Camila Cardozo. I think that is a good kind of mentorship partnership there. You went out and got Ariel Atkins. That's good. You went out and got Courtney Vandersloot. You drafted Hailey Van Lith, as we talked about. Yeah, I guess I just kind of wonder, like, is that all going to be enough? Is this a team that can be a playoff team with Angel Reese as its bus driver? I think those are questions that we'll have to figure out.
We will also be rooting for friend of the program, Sammy Puisis of USF, who will be in training camp and part of the Sky in hopes that she will make the everyday roster as the season goes on. We made it, Mitch. One more team to go, and much like the Connecticut Sun, maybe not, though. How much do you have to say about the rebuild going on in your native state of Maryland with the Washington Mystics?
I really like what they did in the draft. I like the picks that they made in terms of, like, they got three of the best players that were available: Kiki Iriafen, Sonia Citron, and Georgia Amore. All of whom threw out a first pitch at the Washington Nationals game, which was fun to see and pretty cool. I think that Georgia Amore, I know there's a lot of detractors out there about, oh, she's too small, she's too this, she's too that. I think she has a chance to be really, really good. And I look at kind of their projected starting lineup, and like her and Sonia might start. You kind of pair her up with Brittany Sykes. Aaliyah Edwards had a solid rookie season. I think the big question is, like, is Shakira Austin going to be healthy? They do have Stephanie Dolson back, who had a solid year last year despite their record. So it's another team where it's kind of like Golden State, where, like, I don't expect them to be very good, but I think that they will be interesting. And I think, like, there will be things for us to talk about. I'm still puzzled by the head coaching hire that they made. I don't really understand that one. I think we use the term bridge coach sometimes. I think this might be that. But we'll see.
This is their Christie sides. Don't worry, Stephanie White's waiting around the corner, or at least a comp to her. What I'm interested by, Mitch, is that this is a Mystics team, and especially with Georgia Amore, that, to your point, I do think she's going to translate, despite the fact that she's 5'6". But much like Golden State, we had the discussion of who is the face of the franchise. Officially, Elena Delle Donne has moved on.
Right.
I don't want to say that she was holding them captive, but there was this thought of, will she one day come back? And obviously now that has been pushed to the side. She is retired. Who is the face of the Washington Mystics in 2025?
Well, I think that they wanted it to be, going back a couple of years ago now when she was drafted, I think they wanted it to be Shakira Austin, and she just has never been healthy enough to be that. And so we'll see what kind of this season brings, like if she can be healthy enough to be that, or if one of these other younger players sort of rises to the top for them, whether that's Georgia Amore or Aaliyah Edwards or Kiki Iriafen or Sonia Citron. I don't know. I think that, like, Georgia is a really, really fun player who, like, has the potential to be that if everything kind of works out in her favor in the W. I think that the Mystics have the right pieces around her to, like, kind of make her what she was in college, where, like, she was at her best when she could kind of, you put these other, like, really tall players around her and she could kind of just sort of pop around the picks and, you know, put up threes and do her thing. They kind of have that. So we'll see. Or maybe the face of the Mystics isn't there yet. Maybe it arrives in the draft next year.
And she's friends with Russell Westbrook. Don't you forget. That's
design.
Right. That's clothing designer Russell Westbrook.
Indeed.
We made it through this year's 2025, the Women's Basketball Podcast WNBA Primer. Mitch, before we get out of here, it's time for last call. Anything we missed? Anyone you want to plug before we head on out?
Yeah, just go over to SB Nation Breakaway and read some of the stuff I've been writing, and look out for some other stuff this week. I got some softball stories and I got some flag football stories coming everyone's way. So be on the lookout for that.
I'm excited to check out the women's lacrosse stuff as well that you have cooking,
because
we are inching closer and closer to that national championship at the end of May.
It is almost May. Yeah, it's almost prime lax time.
We sleep in May. That's what John Rothstein says. That's not what we say here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. We are just getting started, folks. The W preseason kicks off this weekend. Every single game in the preseason in 2025 will either be nationally televised or live stream. We don't have to worry about Periscope or Twitch video live stream on Twitter or whatever the kids are doing these days. It's going to be available. Flow Hoops. Yeah. Well, you know, I got a story about Flow Hoops once we get out of here.
Baller TV.
Baller TV, the future home of, I won't say what mid-major conference. He's Mitch.
Oh, no.
I'm Mia saying we will catch you next week.
Deuces.